Quick prediction video for Hiroto Kyoguchi versus Kenshiro Teraji. This is the most stacked card of the year. This has been the best card overall from top to bottom throughout the year, with two world title fights, one fight between two top 10 caliber contenders and two former champions in Nakatani and Francisco Rodriguez, and a fight between two lightweight contenders, one prospect graduated into contender in Shuichiro Yoshino and Masayoshi Nakatani. Let's just get into the main event first, Kyoguchi versus Teraji. Very interesting fight. Obviously, this is the best fight that can be made at 108 between the two best fighters in the division. Kyoguchi is a two-weight world champion, was the IBF champion at 105 pounds, having beaten Jose Argumedo for the belt. He made a couple of defenses fighting the likes of Vince Paras, and he also fought against Carlos Buitrago. Eventually moved up, fought against Heki Butler, Nakun, Tetsuya Hisada, and then he, of course, defended against Axel Aragon Vega, and eventually against Esteban Bermudez, and now he's heading into this unification. Kenshiro has made a big list of title defenses against the likes of Pedro Corrin, Yabuki, who he lost to in the first fight by stoppage, and then eventually avenged it by third-round KO, Pedro Guevara, and two victories over Ganigan Lopez. Stylistically, the two are extremely differing. They're almost polar opposites in certain ways. Now, both guys are very active, but in different ways. Kenshiro likes to control the distance and uses footwork and jab to fight at range. He likes to fight out of a long, extended guard. Typically, with his left hand down, he throws a lot of up jabs, and that is the key component of his style, his lead hand, his combination punching, and his footwork. His footwork is excellent. He fights in a very similar style kind of to Naoya Inoue. However, he's a bit more combination punch oriented and doesn't quite have the power. Defensively, he is capable with his footwork, but he does have a lot of fundamental flaws in that sense. He's a person who relies on his reflexes, and he doesn't move his upper body at all, which is his biggest weakness. The worst style for him is back-footed boxers who can walk him into counters, because he's not really a pressure fighter and has to rely so much on his footwork that he can be timed on the front foot. However, you won't have to worry about that against Kyoguchi, who's a front-footed pressure fighter. He's the smaller guy, but he's the fundamentally better fighter. He has more boxing skill. He's more nuanced. His defense is good. He's knows how to move his upper body. He's fought against a little bit better opposition. A little bit better, not significantly better. He's got a number of ways in which he can defend himself. So he can fight out of different guards. He can fight out of a cross-armed guard. He can shoulder roll. He can use a high guard. He's good at parrying punches. He's nuanced in his pressure. He doesn't cut the ring off, and he doesn't have particularly quick feet for 108. But what I will say is he's a phenomenal counterpuncher, and he's a great inside fighter. We saw his last fight against Bermudez, where he encountered a guy who was throwing a lot of combinations, who was bigger than him, and he just systematically took him apart with great timing, peeling the guard and things like that, pre-slips. He's definitely worked on a lot of different aspects of his game, and his counterpunching, his timing, and his fundamental skill, his ability to counter coming forward or going backward, and also his sort of piercing jab, is going to be a big problem for Kyoguchi, or for Teraji. As Teraji, considering he doesn't move his upper body, he's going to get timed a lot, moving in and out. And Kyoguchi is the more precise and accurate puncher. One of the big problems for Kyoguchi in this fight, though, is the fact that he doesn't really involve himself in 50-50 exchanges. Now, when I say that, I don't necessarily mean he doesn't counterpunch, but Kenshiro is someone who throws a lot of combinations, and when he's fighting taller guys who can throw combinations and with relatively long arms, like say Hisada, he tends to backpedal and it forces him out of position. He doesn't really smother. I think that could be an issue for him in this fight, and I think for the most part Teraji is going to outwork him, but it's also going to be a fight that comes down to his accurate pinpoint shots and his ability to time Teraji. Teraji, even in the Hisada fight where he looked excellent, he looked a bit better than Kyoguchi did against the same opponent. He did get hurt in that fight in the 8th round, and we obviously did see him get knocked out against Masamichi Ibuki. So he definitely does have his work cut out for him. If Kenshiro had better defensive instincts, was a little bit better fundamentally, moved his head off the line, knew how to sort of bend at the waist a bit more, and had a better defensive arsenal, I'd be comfortable comfortably picking him to win. However, because he doesn't, and because he does put himself in very risky and disadvantageous positions, I think Kyoguchi stands a very, very good chance to maybe even score a knockdown in this fight. But my pick for right now is going to be Kyoguchi by like a majority split decision. A fight that's potentially disputed, that's going to have varying scorecards because the fight's going to be, the styles are disparate, and Teraji's volume is going to be very eye-catching for the judges. But to an extent, I feel as though they might also want Kyoguchi to win. He does have the promotional backing of Matchroom, and DAZN is, broadcasting the fight, so maybe they'll cast their lot in with him, potentially. But nevertheless, it's a hard fight to call. I'm really not confident in picking Kyoguchi, but I'm going to lean towards him due to the fact that I just prefer his fundamental and textbook. He's a bit better classically trained in boxing than Teraji, who's extremely reliant on athleticism. The rest of the card, we got Jonathan Gonzalez versus Shokichi Iwata. Iwata is someone who's fundamentally not necessarily the best fighter, but he is powerful. He does throw a lot of shots, and he is physically very strong. He is big for the 108-pound weight category. Jonathan Gonzalez's biggest weaknesses is the fact that he's a fragile fighter, and he doesn't really have a great inside game, though he does have a clinch ability that he has developed over the years. He has solid fitness, and he's an excellent boxer. Fantastic counterpuncher out of the straight left hand. Very, very good 1-2, and even has a nice check right hook. He, works the body pretty well with the straight left hand. He's a very good boxer, kind of reminiscent of an Arislandi Lara, except more fragile. And that's obviously something you have to worry about against Iwata, but I do think he should have enough to get the job done. Iwata is kind of like an 108-pound, maybe you could compare him to like a Carl Froch. He does seem to have good fitness, from the fights that I've seen of him, a good engine, very physically strong. But in terms of caliber of opposition, Gonzalez has fought the better of the two. And him squaring up in the pocket, his defensive lapses, I think he's going to get picked apart for the most part. He could come on a bit late and maybe outwork him in some of the rounds, but I just don't think it'll be enough. Junto Nakatani versus Francisco Rodriguez. I'm picking Nakatani to win that fight. Rodriguez made a hell of an impression against Kazuto Ioka. Going in there with Ioka as the pretty sizable underdog and giving him the type of fight that he did. He's physically strong. He's still relatively well-sized for the 115-pound weight category, but Nakatani for those lower weight categories is freakishly big. He's going to be able to meet and out-muscle him on the inside. And if the fight becomes a boxing match, even though Rodriguez is capable of boxing and is a good all-around fighter himself, Nakatani is going to be able to match him in pretty much every department. I think Nakatani is going to win this fight 9 rounds to 3, 8 rounds to 4, something like that. He's probably going to dish a pretty big beating on him, in my view. I just feel as though this is going to be one of those fights where Rodriguez will make adjustments and make things tricky for Nakatani. He might be able to capitalize on the fact that Nakatani doesn't have super quick feet, and he might be able to push him off balance and keep him very wary and have him sort of counterpunch oriented. I think Nakatani's just, his arsenal, his array of capabilities is going to allow for him to adapt and flow through the fight with Rodriguez, and he's going to take over around round 7 or 8 and dominate the rest of the fight. I think it's going to be pretty exciting, though, but I think Nakatani wins comfortably. Shuichiro Yoshino versus Masayoshi Nakatani. It's going to be interesting to see what Nakatani's approaches in this fight is, because he has definitely alternated, I won't say alternated his style, but his punch resistance has depreciated. And considering the bad beatings he's taken in his last 3 fights, he did just have a return fight earlier this year, but in the previous 3 fights before that against Teofimo, the vicious right hands that he was taking, the Felix Verdejo fight in which he was dropped multiple times, and the Lomachenko fight where he was just brutally, savagely beaten. I don't know if he'll be the same, and secondly, I'm kind of curious to see what type of fight he'll fight. If he tries to box with Yoshino, I do think Yoshino will be able to close the distance, as, once again, Nakatani has his feet are basically stuck in quicksand. He does not move his feet well. Yoshino doesn't have the quickest feet either, but he's a good counterpuncher. He's very relaxed in the pocket, has decent punch fundamentals, although he does overreach with his shots. I think it'll be a competitive fight, but Nakatani will probably be looking to box him, I think, out of respect for his capabilities and Yoshino's counterpunching. I think Yoshino will just have a bit too much for him and will outgun him and outwork him. And he beat, arguably, maybe even at this point, a superior opponent to Nakatani in his previous fight against Masayuki Ito. I forgot his name. And he fought Hosokawa a few fights back, the dude with the afro. But yeah, those are my picks for the card. I will talk about the fights in depth tomorrow afternoon once I get done watching all of the fights and I get home from classes. Peace.